Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chamberlain. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We do just about 30 minutes of business before we head back into the Sunrise Daily studio. We'll start from the global space, but today we're starting from Nigeria, telling you about the Naira, how it fared at the close of last week's trade. NAFEM, we say, witnessed improved offers in the market. However, NAFEM still depreciated at the close of trade on Friday, lost 4 Naira 63 kobo, and that's about 0.29% to close right there at 1,598 Naira 56 kobo. Opened at 1,593 Naira. But for NAFEX, that crossed over to 1,006. Remember that last week, we did see the Naira cross a drop up to 1,600 on NAFEM. Recovered somewhere on Friday, but still really close to that. But I guess the good thing is the fact that it's still hovering around 1,005 and 1,006. Breathing the sigh of a little bit of stability and certainty, obviously, for decision-making for businesses. Now, the new Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, Mr. Tunji Bello, says this is his first outing. He says that the agency is concerned about inflated market prices nationwide. He had an interview with our current affairs program, Inside Sources. He mentioned that these concerns prompted a stakeholders meeting before the commission would implement strict measures against violators.
Consumers, and I've seen Nigerians in general, they are feeling the pinch of high inflation, of high prices here and there, and so. So there's need to also come in. As FCCPC, know our responsibility. We are supposed to be responsible for promoting competition in the market and for also protecting the consumers in the long run. So what we are saying is that there are situations where you have people fixing prices here and there, contrary to what's supposed to obtain. And we say, okay, let us engage the traders, the retailers, the wholesalers, and every sector, those who are responsible for letting goods, allowing goods into the markets. And that's what we have come to do. Yeah, and we have listened to them, we have heard their feelings and so on, which is a very good feedback for us. What we are trying to stop is the exploitation. We are not stopping people from doing their normal trade, from making money from what they trade. After all, they are in business to be able to make one gains or the other, as long as they are legitimate. What we are against is illegitimate surplus or profits that people are doing. And there's a gang up already, and we're trying to prevent those gang up from happening.
So that, of course, has generated some reactions. One of that is from the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, CPPE. They've warned the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, to avoid acting as the price control agency. This follows that recent ultimatum to traders to lower prices. The CPP argues that FCCPC should focus on promoting competition and protecting consumers' rights instead of managing retail prices, leaving inflation issues to monetary and fiscal authorities. Meanwhile, the FCCPC, in a statement, has clarified that its directive aims to prevent practices like price gauging and not to control prices. The FCCPC acknowledges the economic challenges and reaffirms its commitment to fair competition and consumer protection while working with stakeholders to address broader economic issues. All right, and still talking about the economy now, as Nigeria navigates a complex landscape of economic challenges and opportunities. Stakeholders have come together to dissect the forces shaping the country's future. According to the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, that's the NESG, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, Nigeria is on a growth trajectory. However, he believes that food inflation must be tackled to ensure sustainability.
products.
The Nigerian Economic Summit Group is reviewing the first half of 2024 at this meeting with the private sector. The group believes that the 68 basis point gross domestic product growth to 3.19% in the second quarter of the year, compared with 2.51% recorded in the corresponding period a year earlier, shows good signs. The panel here believes that the number could have been better if threats to supply of food were handled.
As it is with barley, there's a similar opportunity if we can grow it locally. And we've tried to do that. We've actually kicked off that endeavor in Jigawa, in Kano, in a number of the northern states. But what our challenge has been that the best and the most optimal locations for growing barley are inaccessible. And they're so inaccessible because of the insecurity.
Challenges motivate innovation, and this has happened in dealing with security.
Everybody these days tends to be in charge of their own security, as it were. So what you work with is we have local vigilantes. We'll tell the people in the community that, listen, this is your community. This is where we're farming. So it's incumbent upon you to make sure that your security is important, as important to us, must be important to you. So we have about 35,000, outgrowers who work with us, but we have local vigilantes who take charge of that security system, or the security architecture in that area. Again, government supports with the military and, of course, the police.
Food supply is not the only focus. Issues hindering rapid economic development, as well as key considerations and the way forward for implementing the essential reforms needed to catalyze Nigeria's economic transformation, also makes up the agenda. At the end, the NESG believes that Nigeria has bright chances.
We are on a growth trajectory. Lots of work is required, especially because the sectors that historically were drivers of growth have slowed down still due to macro pass-through risks that were encountered due to macroeconomic volatility. More importantly, to signal going forward that government needs to double down on the big structural reforms. Agriculture and food security remains priority number one.
The tips and optimism shared here is expected to reflect in the results of the second half of 2024. So that's it, Nigeria's economy first half, and optimism for the second half from the NESG. Now let's do oil from the global space. Prices extended losses today, with investors weighing higher OPEC plus production from October against a sharp drop in output from Libya amid sluggish demand in China and the United States, which are the world's two biggest oil consumers. Do remember that the features for October had expired on Friday. So for September expired on Friday. So that of October is what we're reporting from today. So let's look at the prices for Brent. We see 57 cents shaved off for Brent. That's 0.7% to close or to land at $76.36 a barrel. That's for Brent for Nigeria, while WTI of the United States is down also the same percentage, $73.05. And we see closing of gap here between the Brent and WTI. Not a very common scene, but that's what we're having at this time. Now, the losses of 0.3% decline is what was recorded in both last week, 1.7 for WTI, 0.3 for Brent. Now, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and their allies, that's OPEC Plus, they're set to proceed with a planned oil output hike from October next month. 8 of OPEC Plus members are scheduled to boost output by 180 barrels per day in October as part of a plan to begin unwinding their most recent layer of output cuts of 2.2 million barrels, while keeping their other cuts in place until 2025. In Libya, that's where you have shortage of supply now. The Arabian Gulf Oil Company has resumed output up at 120,000 barrels to meet domestic needs, while exports are still halted. Engineers disclose this information after a standoff between factions that shot most of the country's output. And we know that the problem here is the leadership of their central bank, and that has caused some trouble. in the country. Now let's come to our own oil supply, and NNPCL has been receiving some bashes since they released this report acknowledging recent reports regarding the company's significant debts to petrol suppliers, which has placed considerable pressure on the company and poses a threat to the sustainability of fuel supply. This is contained in a statement that was signed by the Chief Corporate Communications Officer of NNPCL, Mr. Olufemi Shuneye. A company, however, it says, assures Nigerians that in line with the Petroleum Industry Act, the PIA, NNPCL remains dedicated to its role as a supplier of last resort, ensuring national energy security. They're actively collaborating with relevant government agencies and other stakeholders to maintain a consistent supply of petroleum products nationwide. Now, of course, you have seen the petrol queues everywhere. I know when this started, even on Business Morning and other program, Business Incorporated, we had analysts who say that this was because of debts being owed to suppliers that has disrupted supply of petrol, PMS. But the NNPC had not either spoken or affirmed that. And so now they tell us, after weeks of queues on the road, that they're being owed. So is this, I wonder what we should be expecting following this. But we've seen an intensified queue. I don't know if you've been out there this morning, you would see that the queues have intensified, obviously, with this news that they shared yesterday, this statement they shared yesterday. Nigerians have become more desperate. And of course, the filling stations themselves, I'm sure they also do some other things about this. Not a very good thing. We know in Libya, when a couple of days of a shortage of supply, the head of the state oil was sacked. Well, I guess that hasn't happened now. Obviously, also following these former candidates of the People's Democratic presidential candidates, Atiku Abubakar has asked NNPC to list. And then on our programs here, we've discussed the issues around inefficiency running NNPCL. That's weighing, we had that conversation on Friday, weighing the country down. I wonder if we would find solution to all of this in the nearest future. Now let's discuss this and other issues with Mr. Oji Odemezue, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Managing Consultant and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consultant Limited. Mr. Odemezue, good morning.
Morning, Ini. Nice to have you again on this show. And I'm sending you greetings from the city on 1,000 hills.
Yeah, Mr. Odemezue, you're not seeing our queues. You're in Rwanda, but I know your family is here.
I felt the queues, horribly before I left a few days ago. We are all in the same mess together, and we're hoping that God will save us through a renewed and a born-again NNPC.
Yeah, I wonder what you think a born-again NNPCL would look like. But first of all, this admittance, after a lot of analysts have pushed this out there, what does it mean really? Does it mean that since they're saying that it's supply costs, should Nigerians be expecting that price of PMS per liter will increase? I know we've paid up to 1,000 for a liter, but at the NNPC stations, we've still been doing 568, at least in Lagos. Should we expect an increase following this admission of debts being owed to suppliers?
Well, the unfortunate reality is that Nigeria is getting refined petroleum products at much, much higher price than we all think or we are all made to believe. Because as Naira continues to depreciate due to the fact that we know that FX inflow has exacerbated or got worse because of the FX issues we are facing. The reality is that the subsidy we were told that was gone has not actually gone. And, to save face, NNPC and, of course, the federal government have found it very difficult to own up to the issues that we're facing. So you now find that NNPC, when they make money from the royalties and taxes from the IOCs, the international oil companies, they end up, wasting the whole money in trying to import the same products, the refined product. And hence, not only are they having challenges getting this product down to Nigeria, we're also having challenges getting funded as a nation, having revenue gaps because of NNPC's major role in supplying government with that kind of revenue. So we have gone from a point where they were claiming there was a supply chain gap. That is, we were hearing mother vessel, daughter vessel issues and all kinds of things. And now the reality is facing us, that the price of this commodity, a very important commodity in every nation of the world, the price is getting worse and worse, and it's hurting the state-owned, even though now private major dealer in that product. How do we move forward? Do we go back to engaging major oil and gas trading companies like Oando and the rest of them, who also have the capacity to find these products and then find a decent and transparent way to handle those gaps in prices? Because in my own view, it might become very difficult to increase prices again right now, even though that's the eventual reality. But because of the way the subsidy was removed quite suddenly, even though it's a very bold policy that we must commend this government for, but there were not structures on ground to remediate or soften the effect on people. We have thought that by now, government should be engaging seriously with all the labor groups and everybody to see how we can provide reasonable palliatives. For example, apart from allowances and minimum wage that has been done quite commendable, even though some of us have our opinions about that amount of 60,000. How can federal government, use some of the gains we've got so far, gains in quote, because it's still a net loss? How can we use that to bring the cost of transportation down? Because the major mode of transmission to inflation is cost of transportation. Energy cost, brings about, and not just transportation, but energy usage in the country. But if you want to deal with the transportation, how can government begin to work with private sector to provide incentivized movement, low cost movement, apart from train, but buses in all 774 local governments in this country, adequate route being covered. And of course, with the other systems we have in place, there won't be excessive cost of movement. But once that happens, even the Gary producer, the farmer in the village will double their prices, which is what we've been experiencing so far. So while NNPC is dealing with this price issue, let's engage on these palliatives before we can now expect that the prices held at 568 or so by NNPC, and of course 600 and something and more than that by other stations, can begin to moderate or be discovered at a better level. So it's a big challenge, quite all right, but I know that NNPC can do it if we begin to think Nigeria right from this moment.
Okay, think Nigeria, NNPC, but you talked about the alternative and the palliative, but we also see economic climate investors moving their capital away from carbon-heavy industry like traditional oil and gas and away from Africa. Sadly, in addition, as a result of, you also have the issue of course, oil thefts, destruction of distribution pipes, insecurity, intractable community problems. We've seen IOCs divest from their onshore and shallow waters. So this, of course, is another aspect to look at. But I mean, we also have this applaudable thing that Oando just did, acquiring or completing the 100% acquisition of Ajib. And we wonder what this part of the scenario can do to help this challenge that Nigerians are facing at this time.
The Oando deal to acquire the Eni's Ajib Oil Company, that's Nigeria's Ajib Oil Company, NAOC, is a landmark development that if our government, our political leaders can harness the opportunity, the whole oil and gas landscape can change for the better. I know a number of those are in the offing, but Oando has shown foresight, clear vision, right from the past 2 decades. They have consistently positioned themselves to invest more and more in the oil and gas sector, particularly in the upstream. And that was a clear vision they expressed. When they acquired ConocoPhillips in 2014. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Ademizu, I can hear you.
That story of it's a story, that confirmed that if you are, a visionary and you stay focused on what you want to achieve, you may have troubles in between. But if
all right, it does seem like we're having a little bit of technical issue with Mr. Ademizu. Let's take a break. We'll come back, and hopefully by then the network with Mr. Ademizu will be okay, and then we'll continue the conversation. Let's take a break right now, and we'll be back. Welcome back. We are still awaiting the re-entry of Mr. Ojidemezue to complete that conversation. But while we wait for him, and hopefully the network will be friendly to us, and we'll have him join us again. Let's tell you a little bit about what happened over the weekend at the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. They have 174 new members that were inducted into that body. And of course, these are individuals that ought to be representing the body both in the micro bank and other aspects of the financial industry in Nigeria. Of course, they've been charged, but let's tell you the story.
741 new members inducted by the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN, during its 2024 second stream induction in Lagos. With the theme of the program, Unlocking Your Potentials, Positioning for Next Levels, the message of ethics and professionalism in banking operations and excellence towards efficiency and customer satisfaction was emphasized by the president of the CIBN, Professor Pius Olariwaju.
As from this moment, they are now the goodwill ambassador of our great institute, and they should represent the institute where they are going. And thank God for the message. The key message every one of them should tell is that they should continue to sparkle. You know, we believe that the challenges are there in the ecosystem, but if they are determined, if they are forceful, if they continue to improve their intellect and everything, they will achieve greater results.
Professor Olariwaju noted that the banking industry is rapidly evolving with new technologies reshaping the foundations of financial services, thus the need for continuous learning for professional growth, networking, and career advancement.
You know, professionalism, integrity, you know, in the system. And I also admonish them that one of the pivotal way of making a great exploit in your career path is for you to be ethical in whatever you are doing.
The president used the opportunity to highlight that factors necessary for unlocking potentials include the adoption of a growth mindset, understanding the evolving landscape, embracing technology, and building a strong personal brand.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're able to get Mr. Demezue back. We would try to get him perhaps later on today or tomorrow. We'll hope to be able to get him back. So let's look at the numbers, the market numbers, see how it closed last week. We see, well, thank God for a positive close at the close of the week. So it's 0.63% is what the all-share went up by. But we're still around 96,000. We've done better than this. Remember one day in this board, we had 100,000 and above. But now we have 96,579.54. Equities cap at 55.478 trillion naira. That's the market cap. And then for volume dropped for the week, while value and deals were positive for the week. A lot of deals took place last week, more than 50,000. That's a whole lot. And value at 53.04 billion. Looking at the sectors now, banking did well. Zenith really thrived last week. Still in the market and catching investors' interest. I think they'll soon be out of the market. So we saw banking 1.96% in the green. Consumer goods looking even much better than that. 3.48. Industrial goods marginally up. Insurance, various CARP and all of that. We've seen them gain grounds and catching investors' interest in the past week. Oil and gas. We're talking about O&O right there with Mr. Odemezue. We hope to complete that conversation maybe later on today or tomorrow. I wonder what's wrong with the network in Rwanda. So oil and gas up 8.5%. O&O is a major driver of it. Since they completed the acquisition of Ajib Nigeria, they've just been catching investors' eyes. So we see that Seplat also joined. Japo Gold is another one that's been also, investors have been friendly towards. All through last week, we saw all of that, even though a bit of profit taking, but also quick recovery and then back up. So oil and gas up 8.50%. I wonder if it's still a good time to get on board or if it's too late, I wonder, but we know how it can go. So top gainers for the week: Owando, Deep Capital, McKnowles PLC, and all of that. Top losers last week had Transcorp Power, MTN Nigeria, Universities. Remember, MTN Nigeria dragged the market down. I think it was on Wednesday, put the market down, lost 9.91%. Top trades: Consolidated, Hallmark, Veriscap. So you see why the insurance counter was so much in the green there. Consolidated, Hallmark, Veritas Capital. Access Holdings representing the Fugas right there. Unfortunately, we've been trying. I mean, my colleagues behind the scene are trying to get Mr. Demezu. We're not able to get him, but we promise that once we can get him on, we'll have him either on Business Incorporated or we'll try to do that tomorrow. Thank God we do have windows for business conversations. But for now, that's much. We'll take on Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Thank you so much for being a part of it. But don't go anywhere, because Chamberlain, Kayla, and Ayo are standing by to give you more conversation, current affairs conversation. Join them.